All right. I'll start with some short introductions here. My name is Antonio Pungarin. I am the new director of programming here at Gage Academy of Art. I started remotely in November of last year. Um, Officially became a Seattleite in January. Well, no, technically, I would say about 2 months later when I finally got my Seattle ID. So I guess that made it official. And I come from an arts education centered background with a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. I made the move to Gage because I am excited about bringing some exciting and new programming um, to a very wonderful and institution with a rich history. And one of these programs is our program today with Michael Newberry. This was in partnership with Figure Ground Gallery. I worked together with Gary to organize this. Unfortunately, our founder Gary was unable to join us today, but he's here in spirit, and we sent him lots of love. Um, that's me. I'm going to allow Michael Newberry, our artist today, to introduce himself and to tell us a little bit about his practice. And yeah, take it away, Michael.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. Um, I started painting when I was 11, 12 years old, and kind of never stopped. Went to fine art school in the 70s, and then moved to Holland, to Greece, and studied there for a few years. Um, the um, I've been painting for 5 decades, almost 5 decades, and full time. Um, Advice for artists that I've seemed to have done well is I've kept my expenses down very, very low. Lived almost on nothing. So if something sold, then it gave me several months of living. And I fell in love with Rembrandt when I was 11, and that really set my path. So I knew I wanted to paint the figure. I knew I wanted human expression for the most part, that I was fascinated by light and all its variations. Then Monet was a big influence on me. And I do a bit like Picasso. I do some landscapes, some still life drawings, line drawings, figure drawings, big works that deal with the figure and details and background. And recently I moved to well, not recently, but 8 years ago, I moved to Idlewild. And there I was becoming a little bit grumpy, getting near 60 years old, getting kind of grumpy. And I set everything on, I recalibrated everything I knew about art. I relearned everything, from monochromes to color theories to everything. And it turned out to be just treating myself like a beginner. It turned out to be the most flourishing creative period of my life. And now it brings me to here.
It's wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing, Michael. Before we continue, we'll be saving questions for the end of our presentation. So I would say by 1:15, we'll save the last 15 minutes of our artist talk for questions from the audience. So any questions that you do have, any burning questions that come up throughout the lecture, feel free to type them into the chat box. Erica is going to be doing a great job at really going through those questions, and we'll get to as many of them as we can by the end of it. All right, let's get started.
Okay. Some of my recent books and soon to upcoming books out. The Newberry Color Theory is what my show at the Figure Ground Gallery and what this talk is about. the talk today and about the color theory is that there are four main elements, and they're all pretty familiar to you if you're an artist. The color of the atmosphere, and this photo by a friend of mine, Petia, is in Santa Monica, and it gives you the idea of what atmosphere is. It's that space between us and the background, like a fog. And then the color and things of themselves, red jacket, blue sky, sienna colored ground, green trees. And then the complementary colors of light and shadow. So the magic hour is usually an orange light with a blue shadow. But in the course of this lecture or the course of this talk, we show that you can switch it. You can have cool lights and warm shadows. And then the complementary colors of depth and foreground. So way off in the distance can have a color, and then its opposite is going to be infused in the foreground. In my book, Evolution Through Art, I discuss the innovations in art. And one of my favorites was this painting by Van Gogh, The Harvest. And in it, you'll notice the atmosphere is, he took the landscape, the golden landscape, and turned it into a bowl. So the gold is like effervescent all around inside the middle of the landscape. And if you notice, the sky is not blue. The sky is a mixture of ochre and blue. So it creates a kind of green sky. And that means that that yellow bounce, the yellow bounce is between us and the sky. And it's a great tool for plein air painters to have, that the landscape can act as an indirect light bouncing up between us and the distant background. The John Constable landscape on the right is the color of things in themselves. So green grass with kind of muddy green shadows, probably a little bit black mixed with the green. Blue sky, white clouds with gray shadows, and then gray stone of the cathedral or the tower. So here he's painting, mostly just trying to get the color of what things are. In the lower left, you can see a man or a woman with a red jacket. The complementary colors of light and shadow. This is a good reminder of this Monet painting of winter scene. White is the easiest. The white snow is the easiest to see how he's doing it. But you can see the cast shadow as having a pale violet tint. And then, like especially noticeable in the gate, inside the gate, the snow in the background of the gate is catching the bright light, and it's highlighted with yellow. And yellow and purple are on opposite sides, and they give a vitality to punch things up. So it's always good when a painting is a little dull, is you look for the complementary colors of the shadows versus the light, and you can complement them. And then the color wheel is a handy tool to have if you're dealing with color. The complementary colors of depth and foreground. In this Bierstadt on the left, that's classic, is that things go blue as they go back in space, and they get warmer as they come forward. So that's very classical landscape, 19th century art. You can see the red leaves, or the red, I don't think they're flowers, but I think they're red leaves. They're bright red in the foreground and orangey there. And then as it goes back, it shifts towards grayer highlights. And then we get the blue in the background. And Van Gogh has kind of done the same thing with the blues receding. And then if you notice, the golden ones in the foreground have a bit of a rusty orange color to them. And then in the middle ground, they're a little bit ochre green. So he's pulling the warm pops of color forward and the cool colors going back. Okay, the wave series this is 16 of my pastels, utilizing this as a color theory, putting this all together, putting the whole thing together. And it's going to be in a solo show at the Figureground Gallery, September 2nd in Seattle. And for example, here's one that I call it green, and it has all these landscapes were kind of typical. They had a blue sky, bluish, darker blue water, and a lot of them had a beige sand. And I applied this color theory, mixing it up to see what would happen. And every single one worked, which surprised me. So towards different periods, I tried to mess it up, tried to do not intuitive color combinations, and it still worked for me. So in this green one, I picked green atmosphere, so like a fog of green, and the depth was cool, and the foreground had orange ochre, and the light was yellow mixed with or opposite purple shadows. And for example, in the foreground, that greenish orangey tint color is the sand. So the sand was a beige mixed with the green atmosphere, mixed with the yellow light. And in the shadow areas, made sure it had purple mixed with the beige. And I went through, and the sky has the same green atmosphere with blue depth and a blue sky, gave this kind of turquoisey color.
Michael, I'm curious. You mentioned that there earlier that there was a little bit of experimenting and sort of drifting away from your intuitive nature to combine certain colors. Were there any moments in creating this work that were maybe frustrating, like where things were just not aligning right in terms of, the color palette? Just curious as to if there was I think we all as artists have our moments where things are not quite lining up as you want. So I just wanted to see if you had any.
Right, and theory is also, it can be problematic. So you do a theory, but it doesn't mean it's going to look good. But I found with this theory, I did get some wild surprises that were a lot of fun. So that motivated me to follow through to get it. But I was shocked that it worked. And so that's why I'm excited to share it. It worked pretty well.
We love that.
Things didn't work. I put in the color theory, and all of a sudden, pow, something fascinating happened. So in the violet one, so it's a violet atmosphere. So the sky in the background took on a lot of the pale sky with pale violet, gave that kind of color. And also, I don't know, it didn't have really clouds, but a little bit of mist, and they caught a little bit of the yellow light. So the sky had a little bit of yellow, blue, and violet mixed together. And in the waves, you can see the yellow highlights on the white. And then if you look into the shadows, you can see that they're kind of a pale violet is in the shadows. And what that enabled me to do is keep the lightness of the waves, the high key of the waves, light, and just making a little change in a little yellow in the light, just a touch of purple in the shadow, gave that sense of real light hitting it. And again, the foreground, you see that kind of peachy gray, that's the sand. And so it had the beige of the sand mixed with violet with the yellow-orange foreground and a tiny bit of yellow light. And I combined those colors too. So the sand wasn't one color. It's a combination of four. A little bit of the highlight yellow, a little bit of the orange, a little bit of the violet atmosphere. And then my artistic skill is just tweaking things to my satisfaction. But later in this presentation, you'll see that there's artist applying my color theory really successfully. Let's move on. So the blue one on the left, so you have a blue sky and then a blue depth. So I doubled up on my blues. And the foreground had this blue atmosphere with warmth and a cool yellow light. So that kind of caca color in the foreground ends up being beautifully set off by the richness of the background. And one of the difficult things to do, especially in plein air, is to pull the foreground forward. Is to pull it forward. And normally you don't think grays are going to pull forward. So in using this color theory, it's interesting to make a kind of muddy foreground color and have it still feel like it could pull forward.
Could you give us a little insight on the scale of some of these paintings? And
they're all uniformly 18 by 24. So I used Canson Mi-Tints toned paper. Some of them are red, orange, brown, black, different colored papers, and Rembrandt pastels.
And was that sort of that deliberate choice of size instinctual, or was that something that you sort of
No, it wasn't instinctual. I don't know if any of you know the designer Chan Liu, L-U-U. She's world famous, and I mentored her for about 10 years. While she was busy with her business, when she had a vacation, she would work with me. And she, one of the features she said was how powerful it was when you group the same things together. And how well that people would then buy the whole group as opposed to one-offs. And so actually it was fascinating to do a show and then have groups of 3 things, the same position, the same size, and the same medium. And then I felt that the audience started pulling themselves into looking at, comparing and contrasting, and really looking and examining the artworks without me saying anything. And I thought that's an artist's heaven. So it really works well that if you're doing portraits, you have 3 portraits, if they're the same size and both vertical. People will look at all 3 and just start naturally comparing and contrasting and getting into your vision and the things that you're playing with. So this set was deliberate to just make the whole set identical in size. So that's a very good question. And I'm very happy with what I learned from Chan about doing that when I put together works.
These are beautiful. I don't know if it's because of the pandemic, but I can feel the waves. I am embracing. I don't know if you can tell by my background. I am embracing vacations post-COVID. So these are gorgeous. Yeah, very nice to look at.
Well, thank you. So if you go to the next one, there's a photo of the photo on the left, the blue, was the reference for the one before it. So if you go back, that one. Yeah. And so putting the color theory helped me transcend the reference material. And of course, as artists, we can transcend the reference material by doing anything different, just not copying. But I wanted to be true to it. But in applying the color theory, it seemed that I made the ocean feel more tangible, more real, and more manipulated artistically, giving it more of my character. So in the blue-violet one, it's a blue-violet atmosphere. And then it's also done in, the original study was done in Apollo Beach in Florida. And there the sand is really shallow. It goes on for miles, only like goes 4 feet deep or something like that. And the sun comes down and pushes back up the bright orange glow or bright yellow glow underneath the waves. And so that's part of the shadow is coming up the bounce reflected up. And in the photo, you only get a sense of it, but not the real, taking it onto another level. Okay. Go back to the gold one. The gold one is where I tried to actually mess up the whole color theory. So I took gold ochre for the atmosphere, which didn't exist, yellow light, violet shadows, gold depth, and a violet foreground. And so combining the gold depth and the gold ochre and the yellow light ended up mixing with just a bit of blue of the sky to give me that color. And then the more rich blue of the water mixed with the golds gave a sense of a green, a golden green color. And then the sand in the foreground is the beige mixed with golden atmosphere and violet, having violet mixed to give that color. And I'm still surprised at how well that flows through space. And that's been also one of the interesting things that I've seen with the students, not students, other artists using the color theory, is that it helped them even stretch out the spatial depth even more without making it dull, without making the depth really boring. Okay. And
Let me know if you'd like me to move forward or however you'd like.
okay, let's move forward again. There's a lot of them. The violet, peach, and gold was also one where I really manipulated the hell out of it. A peach atmosphere, violet depth, orange ochre foreground, yellow light, and violet pink shadows. You can see some of the violet pink shadows gently in the shadows of the waves. And the peach atmosphere mixed with violet, mixed with a little bit of blue, and a tiny bit of light makes that color for the sky. And I find it a very, very, very pleasant, very satisfying artwork. So that also surprised me in doing the color theory. Instead of it being cold and calculated, it took on a kind of atmosphere and feeling and energy that conveyed emotion for me. So this is almost like taking a bath going swimming in Florida in the middle of summer when it's late, when it's getting near dark. And it just feels like everything's humid and warm and really enjoyable. Okay, the next one. The blue-green one was similar to the gold piece as far as the reference material. And in changing the color theory, it takes on a whole different feeling. And while I was drawing these, each one of these drawings took about 12 hours straight. So I got on a roll in about 12 hours. The blue, was thinking about, okay, what's going to be the color of the sky? And it had a blue atmosphere and then the blue sky. And I would say, okay, that's going to be double blue. And then the water did have a bar of blue on it, the original source. It was intense blue there. And so that got tripled up. So I was thinking triple blue, how saturated can I make this blue? Which is normally, I tend to shy away from that when I'm just drawing pastel naturally. I don't want it too saturated, I want it to be subtle. And the warm foreground, that bar of beige sand at the bottom has a lot of gold into it. It's the blue atmosphere mixed with yellow light, mixed with warm foreground, gave me that kind of gold color, which to me just feels delicious. Okay. Oh, this is a life-size painting of Danae. Rembrandt did her where she's catching all the golden light. Zeus came to her in a shower of gold. And I'm changing the legend a little bit to make her the gold light. And I started this painting before I did the color theory. So that was about 1.5 years ago. And so I got the painting and they said, oh, I have to apply this color theory to the painting. So I'm getting closer to finishing it, but I've been applying the gold atmosphere, yellow light, and purple shadows, and a warm foreground and a cool background to this painting. It's more complicated when it's a figure.
I was going to ask because, you know, in studying your work, this month, we met earlier this month via Zoom. And I was able to really study your work and like seeing that your background and working with the figure. It was interesting to see how, I was intrigued to see how you could apply the color theory in these landscapes to the figure, you know, and like, is that something that it seems like that's something that you're still fleshing out?
Yeah, and that's going to be my project for the next 10 years.
Okay.
It's going to be really a serious project, how I'm going to utilize this and really kind of knock it out of the park.
Can you share with our community just briefly, like what specifically makes it more difficult to apply this color theory system when you're working with a figure versus landscapes?
Well, landscapes are more abstract and you can get away with a lot. If a bump on the wave is a bump, but on a person it can look like you know, they've got cancer or something. So you can get away with a lot with nature where you can't with the figure. But it's also interesting that the French Impressionists didn't do high realism. And I think it's because they were working with this color and they weren't absolutely certain how they were going to use it. And so the blotches or the mark making really helped them kind of like say, well, it doesn't have to be perfect, but I've got some energy of color happening there. And realism is so much easier when it's charcoal, when it's all monochromatic, when it's, you know, or shadowed with black and then highlighted with colors, you know, that's much easier to do. But as we'll see with Melvin Toledo's work, Joe Kane just recently applied this. He's a photographer, and that's a digital manipulation that it's kind of shocking. It's very bright, but it feels soft at the same time. And the goats in the landscape, Sonia's, Sonia really hasn't liked landscapes, but she loves nature, especially animals in nature. And she started applying this theory, and then her landscapes have really taken on a new vitality that she's really jazzed by. And these are Melvin's works. He did 4 paintings based on the color theory book. And he did it independently. And this kind of shows you how, by having guidance where you know, well, let me back up one thing. One great thing about the color theory is that every artist using it can put in their own parameters. They can turn it into whatever they want, choosing the main colors, the atmosphere, everything to make it themselves. And what Melvin did here is he's a great realist. But here you can see him using the theory and putting in a lot of color, and at the same time maintaining his realism, which I think is amazing. I'm not sure I could do it on this level. I'm really impressed. And he's been very generous and kind, and he's shared my posts about the color theory, which has been really nice. If people can copy this or screenshot, if you're interested in doing pastels, I've been doing pastels for decades. This is magic. This is what it's all made up of. So soft pastels, Rembrandt New, Sennelier, Blick are good. Canson Me10's paper, also the one with touch that has sandpaper in it, sand in it. Now, one absolutely amazing development that's happened in glass in the last decade is the TrueView Museum glass. Normally when you work on dark paper, it acts as a mirror, and you put glass in front of it and it just acts as a mirror. You get glare all over the place. And it really cuts back on the enjoyment of the artwork. So you see a beautiful pastel and you put it behind glass and you totally lose it. The TrueView maintains it. And I recommend, it costs about $100 for an 18 by 14, 18 by 24. But it's worth the money because you can actually ask more when you sell your work, up to quite a bit more. So it's really worth it, a great investment, and will make working with pastels happy. Editing tools, masking tape, and a handheld vacuum cleaner, like a Dirt Devil. So I work in layers, making marks and layers, and I get about 100 layers. You can use the masking tape to take off the last couple of layers without dulling, without smudging the pastel. It still can be pristine. The same with the vacuum cleaner. You can lift off layer by layer by layer. And I just put the vacuum cleaner on top of the paper and just move it across. And it just picks up the pastel without smudging it. Erasers I only use erasers when I want to get rid of absolutely an area completely and go back to the paper. So then I just dig in with the eraser, but I don't use the eraser like you would in a charcoal drawing. Sennelier Latour Soft Pastel Fixative is the very best. It's fantastic. Glassine goes over the paper when you put it away in your portfolio or in the drawers. And I had a trip where I went to Greece for 3 months doing pastels, and I did 120 pastels. And I was riding mopeds and going out into nature and the beaches, carrying my portfolio. Every one of them came back pristine without a smudge, because of the glassine was layered between each sheet. My favorite portfolio is the 20 by 26 cachet. You fold it up, you put the papers in there, but you can also use them as a drawing board. So it's very handy. What's not in this list is the metal clips. So you need at least 3. If you take the time, copy the studio lights. The newer 85 watt, 110 volt, 5500 Kelvin, trifluorescent spiral daylight. These are my studio lights. I use 2 at least. I have 4, but I mostly use 2. They give you the light of daylight in your studio. So it's almost about as perfectly calibrated to a cloudy day as you can get. And I'm getting older. I'm going to be 65 in a couple of weeks. My eyesight goes a little bit, but my eyesight's good, but I'm just getting older. These have helped me see the purity of the color for what it really is. So for because you all know, you work all night long, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you think you've done a great job, and in the daylight, it looks horrible. These will keep it more unified and even. And then I have a monitor, and I just use a TV screen, 52-inch widescreen TV. And I just plug it, that's my monitor on my desk. So I get my email there, I do everything on that. I'm giving a workshop at the Gage Academy of Art, August 30th through the 1st. It's 3 days, 9:30 to 4:30, instruction in the morning. You do it on your own in the afternoon with a critique at the end of the day. I hope you can join us for that.
Yeah, we're very honored to have Michael join us. It will be at our Capitol Hill campus. And then at the end of the workshop, the following day, on September 2nd, his exhibition opens at Figure Ground Gallery. So I can't think of a better way to sort of close out the summer than with Michael. I don't know if you guys gotten a chance to see our brilliant new website. Kudos to marketing.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you so much. Please feel free to check it out and sign up for Michael's workshop. And then I'm sure he'd love to see many of you at the opening of the exhibition. So at this time, we'd like to sort of break into questions. Erica, if you can sort of go through the chat and let us know what questions our community has for Michael, and we're happy to take it from there.
Yeah, we've gotten quite a few actually throughout the talk. So I'll just kind of go in order of all of them that came in. From Sarah, have you done any time-lapse videos of your process?
Oh, wow, no, not of this. I'll do one, but no.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see. Those are always pretty cool.
Yeah. As soon as I heard, I said, that's what I need to do.
Right. Got to commit a lot of time to that. Yeah. Can you tell us if you are going to teach in person? Oh, and online workshops on your color theory? Yes, just talked about that. How do you start with the color of things first? Then you say, oh, I think a gold light. Is there any consideration to which colors you choose for each?
That's excellent. I start with my technique in pastel is to use the color of the paper and then do a very light, I call it a wash, but it is not a wash. It's just a spaced out lines, very delicately done, kind of like a Da Vinci drawing where you just gently etch the lines. But that is the color of the things. So if I have a blue sky, I'll take out blue and do it on the colored paper. I'll just do a blue sheen, very soft, brown for the ground if it's, or green grass or whatever. And from there, I start tweaking it.
Great. Let's see. So this is kind of similar. Do you put on the atmosphere as one color all over to start? What order do you apply the sky, water, sand, highlights, shadows?
When I work with pastel, I work from the darker colors, increasing the light. So I tend to use the dark of the paper to be the darkest dark. So if it's dark brown, that's going to be my darkest shadow. And then slowly lift up towards the light at the very end. So in this color theory, I'd block it out. So we've got the different colors. And then I would say, okay, maybe I need to work on the water because the water is the darkest area, or the shadows. And then do that. And then as I get to the lightest area, like maybe the waves were always done the last.
Mm. Oh, yes.
I built them up gently, but the last punch, the last touches were the highlights on the waves.
I see. Okay. Yeah, that was the next question was, what is the color, or is there color added to that white foamy crest of the waves that are reflected?
Yes. So all of them had, what's also interesting is the only exception to the atmosphere was the waves, because I wanted the highlights of the waves to pop out of the atmosphere, to just jump. And in the theory, there's color tint given to the light. So in one of them, there was a green light, and another one, there was a blue tint. Mostly I like yellow light, and then having the opposite in the shadow. So if I have green light, I'm looking for a pink or red for the shadows to be a tint in there, mixed in there. so that there's always a contrast between the brightest light of the water and then the shadow.
Michael, there was a question about your workshop. It states for the workshop, is pastel the expected media, or can we use watercolor or oil instead?
Well, officially it's pastel, but I'll work with anyone who wants to paint or watercolor, though I'm not an expert in watercolor. So they have to teach me how watercolor works, but I can help with the color and bring a reference material that they want to work and bring the concepts, like how they want to totally transform that into an artwork that's theirs.
So that kind of segues into another question about mediums. Do you find that the application of your color theory works well with pastel as opposed to oils?
Well, pastel's so easy. I mean, you just add the color on top and it blends in, and it just changes it. You can just put blue on top of orange, and all of a sudden you get a very interesting gray. In oil painting, it's a little trickier, but that's what helps in oil painting, it helps if you understand that, let's say the sky is going to be made up of 4 different colors. It's going to be violet, it's going to have a little yellow, and it's going to have blue. And then you can actually mix the blue, violet, and yellow on your palette and apply it. Where in pastel, it's a little easier because you can just literally take a blue, a yellow, and a violet and mix them up.
Oh, interesting. So Ellen in the chat box, she kind of had a funny comment or a funny way of saying it, but for someone whose passion for creating has been reignited as she is grumpily approaching 60, where and how do you recommend starting a practice? Is it drawing, color theory, pastels, acrylics, watercolor? You know, what mediums would you suggest?
Of resetting, I would go back to basics. Charcoal drawing is awesome. It's very forgiving, it's fun, it's sensual. I like using Reeves BFK paper. Reeves BFK paper. It's a very cotton-based paper that has a very nice feeling to it. Soft charcoals. Those will really help you with tones. And again, I'm not an expert in watercolor. I love pastel for just playing, just having a blast, experimenting and playing. The pastels are beautiful. It's beautiful to the touch. And oil painting is tricky. One great technique in oil painting is you can tone the canvas with the oil painting with a bit of safflower oil. Use safflower oil. It's the best oil medium for oil painting, and it doesn't yellow. It's the greatest, safflower oil. You can paint like a toned drawing or a watercolor, and then you can take the shop towels, the blue shop towels or soft cloth, and you can wipe away the highlights. And it's a very sensual, and it's a very easy technique to use. So it kind of makes like a charcoal drawing, but in oil painting. But it works very easily. So that's how I would start.
So in regards to kind of the base of your work, are you using complementary colored paper to apply pastel?
What I had done is that I'm both in Florida and on the coast of California. I had done these 16 or 24 pastels live. I just gone to the beach, and in 40 minutes, I did something really quick on a big piece of paper. And I kept them in my drawers. And then all of a sudden, when I went to edit them, I applied the color theory. So I didn't systematically start them. So I just used a color I liked originally. So in a way, I don't think you can go wrong. Pick a color of paper that you just feel drawn to at that moment and start with that. Let your subconscious start. And then once you start applying the color theory, hopefully the artwork will tell you what it needs coming back to you.
So we had a couple questions on your color theory. In regards to your workshop, will that be, part of the foundation of your class? And will you guys be working on that?
We were going to be working exclusively on the color theory.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to jump in, maybe starting with the color of the things as they are, and then we just start tweaking them. And with my guidance, and I'll do a demo so it shows how I would do it. And yeah, so by the end of it's going to be a really thorough introduction to the color theory with a lot of practice.
Great. Antonio, do you see any other questions coming in?
Fran writes, for highlights on the water, do you add the atmosphere color with white?
At some point, it has a little bit of atmosphere at the beginning, but towards the end, the white wave really standing out. And so I was looking to pop out the white as much as possible. There will be a little bit of the atmosphere color in the shadow of the wave, but you've got a white wave. So the color of the wave that's lit is white. And so the shadow is going to be white of the wave mixed with the gold of the atmosphere or the violet of the atmosphere, and then mixed with the opposite of the highlight color. So if you have a yellow light for the highlights of the wave, you'll have a little bit of purple, but that purple is going to be mixed with white and mixed with a little bit of the atmosphere color.
Pamela wanted to inquire about your workshop, if it was okay for beginners, really serious beginners, as she posted.
I'm a very enthusiastic teacher. Any light bulb that a student has or any development a student has, I get excited. I really enjoy it. So if you come away with just a few baby steps or a few things, I just love the process of art from the very beginning and to the end.
So would you say?
And like I said, I restored, from being grumpy, I restored everything by treating myself like a literal beginner. Like, how does oil paint work? How does charcoal work? What are the mediums? I just really treated myself almost like a baby. And in doing that, it was a really great refresher course. So I welcome people starting out.
Terry had a question. How does your theory differ from other color theory?
The main thing is that it's the integration. The beginning, when I talked about the color of things and the warm versus the cool shadows and the depth, those were already established color theories. But when you put them all together, including the color of the atmosphere, when you put them all together, it creates this kind of super color theory. And like in the Constable painting, he didn't have any color theory. He just tried to get the color of the things that he saw them. And there's one other element it's a little bit of a segue, is that the art is not a copy of reality. So you can go out all you want to copy reality, but it's not a copy. It needs an artistic thing to transform the two-dimensional surface into something special. And I found the color theory by thinking through what colors the light, what colors the shadow, what colors the depth, what colors the foreground. It gets you so concentrated and focused on all these key factors it's really mind expanding. And I found that when you did them and applied them, something magical happened, something special happened. So.
Do you have a, Hadley asks, do you have a suggestion for a good book on how to mix colors and oils? It sounds like your color theory / workshop is applying colors once you know how to mix them.
I don't have any advice on books about mixing colors other than what you can find by search engines and going online and seeing the reviews, looking at the reviews, and that is, like on Amazon reviews, and kind of trust your instinct, and then you can really learn a lot from them there. My color theory is kind of on a, when it's with pastel, it's not that you actually know how to already mix them. So in intermediate, you don't have to be an expert in pastel to gain knowledge of the color theory in the workshop. But for mixing oil painting, there are a lot of good books out there that you can review and read the reviews and check it out.
Erica, do you spot any more compelling questions there in the chat on your end?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good place to kind of close out, unless if anyone has any more questions about maybe the upcoming workshop or anything to do with that. And we can put in the chat box as well, the link for more info.
I do have my Linktree, linktr.ee/Michael Newberry. Linktree has all the links to my websites and books and YouTube and everything. So Linktree, Michael Newberry.
Okay. I want to thank Michael for joining us today, for taking the time out to talk about your work. Figure Ground Gallery for really partnering with us and making this all happen. I also want to thank our phenomenal marketing team for getting this all together. And of course, as always, our wonderful community for joining us. We really would love you to join us on August 30th for the launch of the Michael's workshop. It's sure to be a really compelling and intriguing deep dive into color theory. So please, I think Erica has shared the link to the workshop in the chat. Feel free to click on there, learn more about the workshop, what materials you'll need, and then join Michael and Figure Ground Gallery on September 2nd for the opening of Michael's new exhibition. Again, thank you all for joining us, and we'll hopefully be sharing this with the community soon. We'll keep you all in touch in case you want to rewatch and hear Michael's conversation. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone that came.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everyone.